Hi, welcome back to Artfully Organized. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the best ways to artfully organize your materials and tools. The art room is unique because there are many different components. We have lots of different supplies and also have to store artwork at various stages and forms. We also have to consider how to organize expensive materials like cameras, as well as hazardous materials like solvents. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Hi, I'm Paula Liz, and I'm an art teacher in Maryland. Welcome to the Art of Education University's Artfully Organized, where we provide tips, tricks, and hacks to help bring order to your art room, while also addressing some of the challenges and complexities that come with art room organization. We'd love for you to like this video if you enjoy it, and to hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode.
All right, our slip is ready to go and we can start filling up our cups with slip now. All of these cups were recycled and I gathered them when the students were eating pears at lunch because they work really well and they have lids that go along with them. They fit a really good amount of slip for about 2 students to share. And I've had to use them for about 2.5 years and they've stood up pretty well. This is probably my favorite part of teaching clay, is getting to process the slip. I'm not afraid to get messy.
All right, so I wanted to pop on to share with you how I organize a lot of my photography materials because it is a lot of materials and they're usually really expensive. So my students each get a digital camera checked out to them at the beginning of the year. We go through like exactly what the bag should look like, what should be in the bag, and then each bag is numbered and it just has like a color-coded duct tape on it. I also recommend, this is a checkout app. I can just scan this QR code and I know exactly who has that camera, because you know how busy your day gets. You're not sure, like you have people coming in, borrowing things all the time. Putting a little QR code on those more expensive materials like the iPads, my Prismacolor pencils, is a great way to keep track of those materials for students.
These are the supply bins that I use for my 3rd through 5th graders. They are, of course, color-coded, and they have any and every art supply that students might want to use. So it is a great way for them to independently decide what they want to use on their projects and have access to it right away.
My grab and go paint supply area is a super important spot in my art room. Painting days can be really busy, so the grab and go area needs to be self-sufficient for all my learners. Not just the older kids that can pick out their paintbrush, but I need it so that even my kindergartners and young 5 friends can go and grab a cup and walk back to their table. So the mugs are always filled with water and the brushes are always in the cups ready to go. It's always in the same place. It always looks the same. Nobody has to question what's happening over there. Everybody knows how to do it. We use mugs in the art room because they are great for the environment. The mugs can be used over and over again. I can use those scrub brushes to clean off the mugs, and the mugs are pretty solid. When I first started using mugs in my art room, I had a lot of people ask me if I was concerned if they were gonna break or kids were gonna hurt themselves on their mugs. And we've only broke 2, and one of those times was because I broke the mug, so it was my fault. So the mugs are working out great for the students. They have a handle, they're easy to carry for kids. I recommend using mugs because you can always get mugs donated to your art room or go to the Goodwill and find them for pretty cheap.
So this is an example of how we organize clay supplies and projects. And then on the front, it shows like what tools are checked out to them at the beginning of the school year. We have them flipped over so they can lay their projects right onto their clay boards. And also the containers help prevent the pieces from drying out too quickly.
Does this cause anyone else immense anxiety? Because it does me. But most of my yarn is organized in the boxes, and on the off chance that something gets too tangled or like kids cut it in the middle or something, I end up with all these little scraps. So this year I started making yarnfetti. It's like little tiny cut chunks of yarn that we're gonna use as like eco glitter, so we can use it to kind of collage, make some textured pieces, great for paper making when we need little pieces. So I'm excited to see what we can do with this. You're just gonna take the like little brain, the little noodle of yarn, and just cut it into pieces. And it's fun because it gets all your anger out, and then you don't need to worry about the fact that your yarn was a brain and it doesn't matter anymore. So that's how you make confetti.
For even more ways to organize supplies and artwork, check out our other 2 mini-series here on YouTube, Art Room Hacks and Run the Art Room. We'll link the playlist up above in the cards and down below in the description box. Secondary art rooms often have more considerations when it comes to supplies. Medium-specific courses like ceramics, darkroom photography, printmaking have tools and materials that are expensive and also potentially hazardous. Janet Taylor, a high school art teacher from the Chicago area, is going to give us some tips and best practices for organizing these materials.
Hey everyone, I'm Janet Taylor and I'm the K-12 content specialist here at AUU, but I'm also an art teacher just like you. I teach high school in the western suburbs of Chicago. These are probably my favorite cabinets ever. I used to have in my other schools the same similar situation with the bins, and I love it because you can keep any communal supplies labeled. Students can access that, especially our Band-Aid drawer in jewelry metals. You need a lot of Band-Aids. Not only in jewelry metals or sculpture class, in any class, as students get older, they're going to need access to things like precision cutters. Anything sharp with blades can be very concerning. Whatever system that you decide to use for your sharps, there are 2 things to consider. The first one is making sure it's really super easy to identify which student has which tool and which one is missing by the end of the class period. The other thing that you need to consider is changing out of blades. Making sure that you have a safety disposal opportunity available is really important, whether it's the little box that they come in or wrapping them in tape before they make it their way to the garbage can. It's really important to keep the dangers down to a minimum. The plastic covers that go on here are really great, except they get lost really easily. And so what I do is have my students open these up and flip the blades upside down and then close that up so it's nice and tight. This kind of prevents any dangers from happening, but also protects the blade, especially if it's a new one. Now, if I'm actually getting rid of or disposing of my blades, I do have a sharps container in my classroom, but if for some reason I don't have that, another great tip is to take some tape, just take a stretch of it, place it on your blade, and then kind of sandwich that over, leaving extra space between the tip and the front. Now, I'm not keeping the tape close to the blade because I want to make sure that it kind of stays flat when I throw it in the garbage. And that really is great because it prevents problems for our custodians.
This is how I organize them, just in one of the foam blocks. And then each 4th grader has a matching number for their class. So when they work in the art room, they always just grab the number that matches their class number. And then at the end of art, just tuck that back in, and I'll always check the needles back in.
So my friends, when we start doing our needle felting today, remember to be mindful about where your helper hand is. So your helper hand is either holding your creation, or you can grab a pencil to hold it so that you're not feeling so worried about where your actual helper hand might be.
Safety glasses are really important in a lot of capacities, as well as respirators or masks like dust masks or gloves. I also keep a container full of hair ties to remind students to tie their hair back, and they can keep that. It doesn't cost me much. It's not a big deal. Any tools that need an extension cord, it's best to do the work by the outlet. So even if you need that extension cord, you're not draping across from a cabinet all the way across the room to a tabletop. That is going to create a tripping hazard, etc. in your classroom. You can temporarily tape the cords down onto the ground using something called gaffer's tape. Check out your theater department. But we are also very lucky to have these drop-down, quick-release type extension cords at different tables. I know that not every classroom has those really cool drop-down extension cords, but there's a lot of different ways that you can actually organize your extension cords in your classroom. One way is this cool mechanism here. Basically, it stays plugged in, which is really nice. You never have to worry about students pulling in and out of the outlet. But then also you can just pull the cord down, and then you flip this little piece back and rewind it, and it winds it back into a nice cord into your little net there. Another option is having your cords hung up on a wall, right? Just from a hook. So I go back to my theater background of coiling cords, and you can see in this particular one, it has been bent and knotted and twisted, and we do not want to do that for our cords. So the best way to do this is to do an over-under kind of a loop technique. And when you lay it back out, it's nice and flat and no kinks in your extension cords. And lastly, a couple tie options. You can use a piece of twine, you can use a very colorful piece of yarn to tie off your extension cords, or you can get one of these cool Velcro pieces that I actually use for all of my electricals. Because this classroom can be potentially dangerous, I want to make sure that parents and students understand this. We have a safety contract that everybody signs. We read this together as a class. Students sign it, they take it home, parents sign it, it comes back to me. I can either scan those in and keep them in a folder on my desktop. I can 3-ring punch it and stick it in a binder so I always have it, or I can make this form a Google form, and that way it's all taken care of in a spreadsheet for me. We really want students to understand the power of these tools, not to be totally afraid of them, but also not to be goofy and stick their fingers in places that they shouldn't. Allowing students to know that they all can use these tools appropriately and safely, you're going to create this environment that keeps the safety hazards down low. If you do not have an emergency shutoff anywhere in your classroom for machinery or kilns, for example, this is one to advocate for. So somebody sees somebody in danger, they hit the button, everything cuts off, and electricity is done. Once that's installed in your classroom and everybody knows how to use it and how to get to it easily, you want to make sure that the pathway is clean and clear at all times. Students need access to the fire extinguisher. We teach them how to use that. They need access to the fire blanket. They need to know how to use that. And we need to make sure that they know how to turn off the emergency switch and turn it back on, as well as get to the eye wash station and how to use them. When setting up machinery or even temporary stations in your classroom, it's really important to consider the space around it. So how are students accessing the space? How are they walking around the space? And how much space is in between machine to machine? You don't want a ton of students waiting in line. You don't want them cluttered together. At my previous schools, I had to start from scratch, from the bottom up. And that's a really important time because your administration is going to look at you as the expert. Now, I am no expert in ventilation systems, but it's really important to pull in the experts to help you figure that kind of organization out. When we're organizing our systems, it's also a great idea to think about what you're in control of and what you're not in control of, but how can you work around to make sure it works for everybody? So in this particular case, our soldering station, we have it right by our ventilation. That's great. But that hose to the gas line with the torch on the end is draped across our table, which is not ideal. And so we purchased some little, hose clamps or whatever. You stick those in there and then that hose will stay put as opposed to draping across our soldering station. But you can also see we've placed the torch hook up at the top. It's stabilized with some heavy duty magnets on top of our ventilation system. Students can place that hot torch up on the hook as opposed to accidentally leaving the torch on the table, burning a hole into our gas line, which would cause a much bigger issue. Each student in this particular classroom has their own workbench, which is so ideal and amazing. You can see we can pull out each drawer, see some organization of the tools, some little diagrams that show students what's in there, as well as the names associated to help them remember what it is that they're using.
Are you enjoying these tips? For a more in-depth look into the materials and processes for a specific medium, check out one of Art of Education University's online studio courses. Click on the description box below for more info.
Now, obviously, it's ideal when students have their own setup at their own tables. This is not feasible in most environments. A great tip is to talk to your theater department or wood shop, see if they can help you make a few cabinets. I like to toss a little pegboard in the back. I hang up specific hand tools like coping saw or jeweler's frames or anything else that could hang up like that, pliers, etc. I draw or trace a little line around that. And that's a really great way for you to see by the end of class what tool is missing. I have been in plenty of places and situations where a regular old cabinet will house our solvents and aerosols. That's not a great situation. So I highly recommend you advocating for investing in a flammables cabinet. And even if you can just get one or a small one for your entire department, keeping any fixatives, any sprays, any solvents, and especially in etching, those kinds of things, they're very corrosive, and it's really important that we keep those under lock and key. So this includes obviously anything jewelry related that could be like ferric chloride or other types of corrosive chemicals, but also things like adhesives, really strong adhesives that are not water-based, or any sort of oil painting materials that you might use for your classes, solvents, oils, any sort of paint thinner that you might have, as well as spray fixative or spray mount and spray paint. Now, a lot of us love to put all of our chemicals into small jars, sometimes like baby food jars, to make it a little bit more accessible for each student to use. Take off all labels from your jars and then label them exactly what is in that container, both on the sides and on the top.
Hey art teachers, that wraps up our episode on art supplies. If you have more ways to organize materials and artworks, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Also, make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on so that you don't miss a single episode. Next, we'll be talking about table caddies and how to organize and use them in the art room. See you soon!